Going into the 2018 Minnesota Vikings season, expectations couldn't be any higher as the team was filled with elite talent up and down the field. So let's look into it and let's look at the top 10 Minnesota Vikings of the 2018 season. So I'll start off number 10. Trae Waynes, a cornerback who I thought turned into the Vikings' best cornerback throughout the year, even though Xavier Rhodes was matched up on most number ones, and at the second half of the year, Mackenzie Alexander was very, very good in the slot, but Trae Waynes was consistent all the way through, had a very good year. Stats don't pop off the page, only one interception on the year, but talk about a guy that can be very, very elite in the run game, and then this year he turned into a very, very solid pass defending cornerback as well, only giving up one touchdown on the year, and that was at the Rams game where everybody gave up a touchdown. So Trae Waynes being very good. Xavier Rhodes was hurt throughout the year and got burnt almost every play, and Mackenzie Alexander, despite being so elite the second half of the year, was very poor to start off the year. So Trae Waynes gets number 10 due to his consistency at the cornerback position all year. Pro Football Focus gave him a decent score on the year of a 69.1, which gives him an overall ranking at 49 for cornerbacks, which is above average. So moving on, number 9. One of the Vikings' free agent acquisitions, Sheldon Richardson. His 4.5 sacks were his most sack numbers since 2015, and I think he really had a good experience in his first year in Minnesota, tallying 49 tackles, and I think did elevate the Vikings' defense a little bit more, and you would expect that to elevate his running mate at defensive tackle, Linval Joseph, but instead Linval regressed, and Sheldon had the better year. So I think Sheldon gave the Vikings exactly what they needed out of the 3 tackles. So I'd love it if the Vikings could re-sign him. Now, he's only at number 9 due to some inconsistencies throughout the season, but at 28, I think another year at the Vikings will suit him very well. And since he had by far his best year, his best sack numbers since 2015, where he had 5, I think he would love to stay in Minnesota, so hopefully the Vikings get something done where Sheldon Richardson can stay in Minnesota. Pro Football Focus gave Sheldon a total grade of 72.2, which gave him the 47th best defensive interior lineman in the NFL. Number 8, another Viking that's due to free agency, Anthony Barr. Such a polarizing player on the Vikings. 55 tackles, 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble. His numbers are so weird because he does so many other things for the Vikings. He has a dot on his helmet, right? So he gets the plays from Mike Zimmer. Zimmer trusts him to be the leader of the defense, but I don't know if his play really shows that. His 55 tackles are his career low. His rookie year, he had 70 in 12 games, where he had only 55 in 13 games this year. So I think his rookie year really shows the type of regression he had. He had another sack more in his rookie year and 1 more pass deflection. So I think that's what hurts Anthony Barr's stock, is due to his overall regression. Now, of course, he's still very good. He made the top 10, and I think the Vikings would love to keep him, but do they want a guy that seems to have these weird up and downs where he just doesn't play as well as you'd want him to every now and again? And if the Vikings want to give a top-notch linebacker money to a guy that nods 55 tackles and kind of falls asleep on the defensive side of the ball. So that will be something the Vikings will have to look at. And Pro Football Focus gave him an overall grade of 71.4, which gave him the 26th best linebacker grade. So that makes him a pretty solid pick according to Pro Football Focus. But I think his total regression is what made the Vikings not like him as much. So if that's the reason he walks, then that's a good reason why. Moving on to number 7 was Kyle Rudolph, to finally one of the offensive side of the ball, into our tight end. His 64 receptions and 634 yards were very good. I think both were third most of his career, but the smallest number was 4 touchdowns, which is very surprising. His 4th touchdowns were his worst since 2014. And in 2014, he only played 9 games. So I think the Vikings really need to involve Kyle Rudolph more, because I think that's the biggest factor of his seemingly a little bit of a lack of production, especially in the red zone, because he is Rudolph the Red Zone Ranger. So I think the Vikings need to get him involved more when we're in those situations, because he does have those mismatch factors that the Vikings need to take advantage of. But the Vikings did not do that as much in 2018. I think due to wanting to have 6 bodies in front of Kirk Cousins to give him time to throw to some of our other receivers and try to establish more of a run game, which never really happened last year. But despite that, still ended up having a very good year, and everybody's talking about his lack of production, but he was still having one of his best years. So I think this is what Kyle Rudolph does, and then this was one of his biggest years in having to be forced to block a lot more. So he had to improve, but ended up being right around average again at blocking. And Pro Football Focus was pretty hard on him. A grade of 64.2. Which was the 35th ranked tight end in the NFL. But you have to keep in mind, Pro Football Focus cares a lot about run blocking, and Rudolph still isn't very good at that, so I think that's where the Vikings should be looking at. But Rudolph's still very, very solid, and hopefully the Vikings can utilize him more next year. So number 6, Anthony Barr's running back, Eric Kendricks. A tackling machine has had a nose for the football his entire career. 108 tackles, a sack, 1 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions. Does a lot for the Vikings. He does suffer from similar problems from Anthony Barr, where he can get on mismatches and not do very good in those situations. But I thought he was just a lot more consistent than Barr. 108 tackles, 45 assists. He had a sack. Of course, his 7 pass deflections. I think Kendricks brings more to the Vikings defense than Barr. And it's going to be great to see if he can take another step forward and see how good he can do if the Vikings have to go somewhere else than Anthony Barr to be alongside of Eric Kendricks, especially since they do a lot of those double get type blitzes, and see how well he will perform if he has a much different running mate next to him at linebacker. But I think still a very good year for Eric Kendricks. Pro Football Focus, not as high on him, 64.5 grade, which was the 46th best linebacker in the NFL. So an okay year, but I think good enough to make the list and pretty high on it. Now, top 5. A lot of offense here. To start off with, the captain of the offense, Kirk Cousins, the stat king. 30 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 4,200 yards, a rating of 99. Kirk Cousins might be the best player in the NFL at producing MVP-like stats and then performing so poorly against other teams with that MVP actual players. But his stats are absolutely phenomenal. Of course, 4,300 yards, about 270 yards per game, 30 touchdowns, which was a career high. The 10 interceptions, which were a career low in games where he started all 16 games. So you can't dismiss how good of his stats were, but of course, the monkey on his back, can he beat these winning teams? And it's something he extremely struggles in. Now, I think he's kept us in those games a lot more than Case Keenum or Teddy Bridgewater would. Look at the Rams game where he had a shootout with Goff, or the Saints game where he kept us in that game as well. But then a couple bad plays by some of our other players, and the Vikings lost. So some of these games aren't on Kirk Cousins, but some of them are. So Vikings will have to get him in a position to take that next step forward. Because despite of his top 5 quarterback stats, he is really just more of an average quarterback. Pro Football Focus gave him a grade of 79.3, which was 15th in the NFL, which puts him basically right at average. So despite having phenomenal stats, he is right around average, and the Vikings will have to get pieces around him so he can take the Vikings to the next level. Number 4, the final 4. I think the Vikings' best player the last couple of years took a little bit of a step back this year. That is Harrison Smith. 84 tackles, 3 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 3 interceptions. How am I saying this guy had an off year? He was everywhere. I don't think he was as splashy, as much of a factor as he has been in the past. It's kind of hard to explain, but the Vikings maybe didn't use him as well as they could have. Maybe he took a little step back, but I don't expect that to be a trend going forward. His numbers are fine. 84 tackles is a fairly average year for him. 6 pass deflections is fine. 3 interceptions is Harrison Smith. He's not a super splashy defender to begin with. But you go back to the Eagles game a couple years ago in the NFC Championship game, you wonder if other offensive have watched the film and be like, alright, this is how you beat Harrison Smith. He's not good on man-to-man coverage. Put him in those situations, and then they will not do well. Pro Football Focus agrees with that, giving him a grade of 79.7, which was the 14th ranked safety in the NFL. So a guy that for years has been a top 3 safety, absolutely phenomenal, down to 14 is a very big drop off from a year ago. So hopefully he can take another step forward and be back to his elite self come next year. But still very good. Number the 4th best player on the Minnesota Vikings, and really does it all. He may not be the fixer like he used to, but he definitely is very good at helping out the rest of the squad. But number 3, we go to the new best player on the Vikings defense. Who would have thought? It's Danielle Hunter. He is highlighted by his 14.5 sacks, which is phenomenal. Well, I think his best trait is how good he is at stopping the run. 72 tackles, which by far is best of his career. But this guy's a defensive end, and one of the biggest things the defensive ends do is when there's an outside run, contain it. And every single time the opposing offense does an outside run to Danielle Hunter's side, he either stops it for a minimal gain or makes the runner cut inside where he gets help and he'll get tackled again for a minimal gain. So Danielle Hunter, such a great piece of the Vikings defense, got paid big bucks in the offseason and absolutely proved that he deserves it. For my money, he's the best 4-3 defensive end in the NFL. Pro Football Focus gave him a grade of 78.4, which gave him the 16th best edge defender grade in the NFL. I think that's a bit low, or a bit not good enough for him. I think he should be about top 5. But Danielle Hunter, so good, despite what PFF says, and I think will only improve. So young, so good, and the leader of the Vikings defense. But the top 2, really a flip of the coin. Which one do we want to go with? And I will say number 2 is Stefon Diggs. 102 receptions, his first 100-yard receiving year. 1,021 yards, his first 1,000-yard receiving year. And 9 touchdowns. Stefon Diggs can do it all, and I think might be turning into the face of the Vikings offense. Give Kirk Cousins time, give Stefon Diggs a good matchup, and he can beat anybody on the field. Throughout the year, he, again, 15 games, which is the biggest knock on Stefon. Can he play a full 16-game season? But otherwise, of course, 102 receptions, 1,021 yards, an average of 10, and he has a long of 75. He's very explosive. 3 20-yard receptions, 2 40-plus receptions, 49 first downs. Can't say enough how good of a playmaker Stefon is. He can catch a little short pass and get 5 to 10 yards after the catch every single time. He has fantastic hands. I think he almost went the entire year without a drop. So Stefon Diggs, so good, and I think the Antonio Brown comparison is so good for Stefon, and he should only get better. 25, the sky is the limit. Expect another jump next year. Pro Football Focus might say, well, how good he is without Thielen. 81.1 grade is elite. It's a 19 overall wide receiver, so very, very good, but his running mate, Adam Thielen, even better. Number 1, did you know he's from Detroit Lakes? Did you know he went to Minnesota State? Did you know that he was undrafted? I did not. Adam Thielen, so good. 113 receptions, 1,373 yards, 9 touchdowns on the year. It's been so long ago But do you guys remember once upon a time, nobody could stop this man from getting 100 yards every single game? It was so crazy to watch the beginning of the Vikings year where every game, 100 plus yards, that record is that consistency is so hard to find, and to do it week in, week out. What Adam Thielen did, hands like glue, one of the best route runners in the NFL, and every other stat is 113 receptions and 1,300 yards were fairly predictable. Weren't so far off from last year with Case Keenum throwing him the football, where he had 91 receptions for 1,200 yards. So just a little bit of an increase there. But the biggest part of Adam Thielen's game that got improved was 9 touchdowns. His 9 touchdowns are so huge, because that's not what Adam Thielen did for the latter part of for the beginning of his career. He had 9 touchdowns this year. He had 10 for his first 4 seasons. He only had 10, so almost doubled his touchdown production in just 1 year. So if this can be a trend upward and not just a fluke season where he'll go back to getting only 2 or 3 touchdowns a year, it would be great. And if him and Cousins can keep this connection going, holy cow, this guy could be even better. And Pro Football Focus agrees, giving him an overall grade of 89.5, which was number 5, the 5th best receiver in the NFL. So the sky's the limit. He can keep it going. And let's keep this going in the comment section. Give me your thoughts. Give me your top 10 in the comment section down below. Did I miss any of your favorite players? Did you think Xavier Rhodes deserves a little bit more credit? Maybe Linval Joseph? There are a lot of players that weren't quite good enough to make this list. Do you think there was an offensive lineman? If you think there was an offensive lineman to make this list, you're absolutely wrong. But regardless, give me your thoughts in the comments. And see you guys in the next Joe Z Vikings video. See you guys then.